Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Bay, Tavshin Pei Aleph. I'd like to dedicate this class to my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Zecher Nishmas Shalamis Bas Yaakov Eliezer. We're going to be discussing a pasuk verse toward the end of the Parsha, after the Jewish people, or as the Jewish people are leaving Egypt. Perek Yud Beis Pasuk Lametes, chapter 12, verse 39. Vayoifu es habatzek, and they baked the dough, asher hitziu b'Mitzrayim, that they took out from Egypt, ugois matzahs, flat matzahs, flat unleavened breads, ki lo chametz, for it had not risen, ki garshu b'Mitzrayim, for they were chased out from Egypt. Vayachlis mameya, they weren't able to wait for the dough to rise. The gamsei tells provisions. So the Torah tells us that the dough that they took out of Egypt had to be baked unleavened, had to be flat or flatter bread, not a high bread, because it didn't rise. And they didn't have a chance to let it rise because they were chased out from Egypt and they had no time to let it do so. So this is the pasuk that we mentioned on the Seder night when we reach the section where we explain the mitzvahs of the night of Pesach, Matzah, Umar. Pesach is the discussion of the Paschal sacrifice. We discuss the mitzvah of Matzah, and we discuss the mitzvah of Mor. And when it comes to Matzah, we read in the Haggadah as following. Matzah zu shenu eichlim, al shuma. This matzah that we eat, why do we do so? Part of what we have to do at the Seder, when we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt, is to explain these three mitzvahs. The mitzvahs of Pesach, Matzah, Umar. By matzah, we read, this matzah that we eat, for what purpose, for what reason? Al shum shalei hispik b'tzeikam shalav lahachmitz. For the dough of our forefathers didn't have a chance to rise, until the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself upon them, and redeemed them. Shemar, as it states, the pasuk, the verse that we just read, they baked the dough they took out from Egypt, flat matzah. For they had not risen, for they were chased out of Egypt and they weren't able to delay. And therefore, that is so it is this that we are remembering. The Haggadah tells us when we eat matzah, we're remembering this, remembering how our forefathers, when they left Egypt, had to eat bread that hadn't become leavened, bread that didn't rise, because of the fact that they were chased out so quickly. So the question is, what is the importance of remembering this? Why is it so important to remember that they were chased, that they were made to leave Egypt so fast that they didn't have enough time to let their bread rise? Why is the dough rise? Why is it so important to know? So tonight, I'm going to share with you three explanations that are given to this. First explanation I'm going to share with you is from the commentary of the Seforno. And the Seforno actually is not here in Parshas Bay. It's a Seforno in Bereshis. It's a Seforno in Parshas Miketz, where after Paro has his dreams about the 7 fat cows, the 7 skinny cows, the 7 fat ears of grain, the thin ones swallow up the fat ones. He wakes up in the morning. He has no interpretation. No one's giving him a satisfactory interpretation to his dreams until the wine butler remembers and tells Paro about the Hebrew slave who interpreted his dreams correctly in when they were in jail together. So the Torah reads, "Vayiritzu min habar," and they rushed Yosef out from the jail. They changed his clothing. He cut his hair. He stood before Paro. But the Torah stresses Vayiritzu min habar, and they rushed him out from the bar, from the jail, from the pit, which was the jail. Now, the reason why they rushed him out was because of the fact that, Pharaoh was very upset. And when the Pharaoh is upset, everybody wanted to make sure to relieve him of his distress as soon as possible. So they rushed him out of the pit. That would be the simple explanation. But I think what the Sephardim wants to explain is, why is the Torah telling us this? Why is it important for us to know that they rushed him out of the jail, out of the pit? For our purposes, all we need to know is, seemingly, they took him out and he stood before Pharaoh and interpreted his dreams. Why does the Torah have to tell us that they rushed him out? Writes the Sephardim, Kederech kol teshuas Hashem. This being rushed out of the pit is like the way of all salvations of the Almighty. Shenasas k'mayraga. It's done in a split second. Ka'amroi, as the pasuk first states, Ki kroi v'yeshuasi lavoi. For my salvation is close to coming. When it comes, it's right there. It happens immediately. Uka'amroi lu amish meyali. V'kach haya inyan Mitzrayim. And this is what happened in Egypt. Ka'amro, as the Torah states, Ki garshu Mitzrayim, because they were chased out of Egypt. Ka'amro Mizal, as our sages explain, or as the Torah actually says, Shlahizbik Mitzeikan Shalavaisenu Lahachmitz. Well, he's quoting the wording from the Haggadah. That as said in the Haggadah, Shlahizbik Mitzeikan Shalavaisenu Lahachmitz, the door of our forefathers had no time to rise. And the same thing will happen in the future by the coming of Mashiach, as it says, and suddenly the master will come to his palace. So the Sephardim is telling us is that there's a common denominator, or there's a common explanation between Yosef being rushed out of the jail and the Jewish people being rushed out of Egypt. And that is because when Hashem's salvation comes, it comes in a split second. The Jewish people, for them to leave, out fast. Boom, out fast. Yosef's time in jail is up. Boom, out. And to think about that. Yosef's in jail. He's been there for 12 years. 2 years ago, he spoke to the wine butler when he interpreted his dream to mention him to Pharaoh. Guy forgot about it. So Yosef is sitting in the dungeon. Nothing's happening. Dark. No end to the tunnel. And all of a sudden, boom, he's out. We rush him out of the jail. That's because Hashem's salvation comes in the blink of an eye. The Jewish people have been slaves. And they've been slaves. And it's time to go out in a second. And as the Sephardim concludes, and the future redemption, the master shall come in suddenly to his sanctuary. There'll be some kind of a sudden coming. All this is about the idea that the salvation of Hashem comes in the blink of an eye. It's very sudden, very quick. And perhaps the explanation to that is that the quickness of this redemption makes it clear that this is not happening under normal circumstances. This redemption is not happening with normal means, in normal ways. It's the salvation of God, because it just comes all of a sudden, without any outside help. It just comes suddenly. There's no, again, it sounds like it's saying that there's no buildup. There's nothing that's happening in a way that you would expect it. When it happens, boom, it happens. Now, that may be a little bit hard to understand when it comes to the Jews leaving Egypt. I mean, they were eating the korban Pesach, they're waiting to leave. But there is something about the actual redemption happening quickly, happening in the blink of an eye, happening so quick. If it was happening under normal circumstances, it wouldn't happen this quick. It takes time. It takes time for it to happen. But when it happens so fast, then there we see it's the hand of Hashem. Yosef just, all of a sudden, he's out of jail. He's sitting there in the dark, no hope. Oh, he's out of jail. Why? Because because Paro had a dream last night. All the suddenness, the quickness, the salvation happened in the blink of an eye is something that tells us this is not natural. Naturally, it would happen in a slower manner. In fact, it happened so sudden, so quick. That is Hashem. So that's the Sephordo's explanation. Remembering the fact that Hashem, the idea of remembering that Hashem took us out so fast is this idea of Yeshua's Hashem Keref Ayin. Hashem's salvation comes in the blink of an eye. And when we remember that, then that helps us see, it becomes clear to us that it's supposed to hand of Hashem. That's the Sephordo. Next, the Kaddish I'd like to give you is from the commentary of Malbim. The Malbim also is discussing what is the point of the fact that we were rushed out. And the Malbim says like this. This idea of being rushed out of Egypt is the main point of the miracles of the Exodus from Egypt. Everything that happened, the purpose of our redemption from Egypt was not for our physical benefit or a national benefit. Because for that, there was no reason to rush. Because the purpose of our redemption from Egypt, again, was not for our physical benefit. It wasn't for national benefit, but it was rather for the purpose of us becoming Hashem's chosen people, a sanctified, holy people that would receive his Torah. The main point of the redemption from Egypt was a redemption of our souls, a redemption of our essence. And this is brought to the fore by the fact we were rushed out. The Jewish people in Egypt had become so attached and sunk into the ways of the Egyptians, into their idol worship. They were involved in the idol worship as the Egyptians were. And he quotes the Talmud that says that when the Jewish people stood by the Red Sea, and the Red Sea had not yet split, the Jewish people had nowhere to go. Okay, so the Red Sea splits. You've got the Jewish people in the Red Sea, with the Egyptians entering the Red Sea. And Hashem wants to close the water on the Egyptians. And the angels say, wait, what's the difference between them? They're both idol worshippers. The Egyptians in idol worship. That means, says the Malbim, that they had become so assimilated in they had become so assimilated into the ways of the Egyptians that, as he says, they were sunk into the idol worship, into the abominations. They acted like them, as the Torah says, as the Gemara says. The angels complained, both are idol worshippers. And the assimilation amongst them was so great. Would they have stayed there even a little longer, they would have been lost eternally. They would have sunk into the spiritual impurity of Egypt, sunk and never come back up. They would have assimilated and basically become lost amongst the Egyptians forever. And even if, and let's say after that, they would free us, we wouldn't be slaves anymore. What we have gained. So now we're free, but we became so assimilated into what the Egyptians were that we'll be free, but we'll still be idol worshippers, and they'll be, what do we gain? And for our primary good, for the success of our souls, Hashem rushed us out. Cut. What he's saying is like this, is that the Jewish people, there's a concept that the Jewish people were about to sink to what's called the 50th level of spiritual impurity. When you hit that level, you're gone. The Jewish people had to be rushed out of Egypt because a second longer, they would have sunk into the 50th level. The Jewish people had become so involved and so assimilated into Egyptian society that their souls were so deeply and negatively affected in a sense of impurity, in a sense of being separated from Hashem, that they were coming to a point that the impurity would have touched them so much that there would be no turning back. They would have been lost spiritually forever. And therefore, being rushed out of Egypt prevented that from happening. Therefore, it says the Malbim, the purpose of remembering that we were rushed out from Egypt is to realize, why do we have to be rushed out for? What was the rush? The answer is the rush was because a bit longer, we would have been lost. We would have just been Egyptians. We could have become freed, wouldn't have been slaves, but we'd just be like Egyptians. There'd be nothing to us. And the goal of what we're meant to be, Hashem's chosen people with his Torah, could never have happened. So we have to be rushed out so that we don't become so spiritually detached from God that there's no turning back. That shows us that the purpose of leaving Egypt was not for us physically, nationally, but spiritually, for the purpose of redeeming our neshamas, redeeming our souls, so that we can rise to be what we're meant to be, Hashem's chosen people. The purpose of remembering being rushed is to remember what was the main goal of leaving Egypt. The main goal of leaving Egypt was so that our souls would be redeemed, so that we would be able to receive the Torah of Hashem's people. That is the importance of remembering being rushed out. Because why do we have to be rushed out? In order that we spiritually shouldn't become lost. And why don't we become spiritually lost? Because our whole purpose of leaving Egypt was to receive the Torah of Hashem's people. Thus, remembering how we were rushed out gives us the understanding of the whole purpose of why we left Egypt, the purpose for all the miracles. We were about to become spiritually lost, and God rushed us out so that shouldn't happen. So that the true purpose of leaving Egypt could be fulfilled, to become Hashem's people with receiving his Torah. That's the Malbim's explanation as to why it is so important to remember how we were rushed out. And that's why we eat matzah. The third explanation I want to share with you comes from the commentary called Matzah Nisim on the Haggadah. And the Matzah Nisim actually discusses 2 points, 2 very important points. The first point is that we say in the Haggadah that the reason why we're eating matzah on Pesach on the Seder night is to remember that we were rushed out from Egypt. The question is asked that the Jewish people had to eat matzah before they left Egypt. The Torah commanded them to eat matzah with the Karban Pesach, with the Paschal sacrifice that they ate before they left Egypt. So at that point, there was no reason because they were rushed out. They ate matzah before that even happened. There was a mitzvah to matzah even before that happened. So how do we make these 2 things work out? The Matzah Nisim brings an answer that actually there is the reason for matzah before we left Egypt and the reason for matzah after we left Egypt is actually two different reasons. The Torah tells us to eat matzah for 7 days, which really means we cannot eat chametz for 7 days. On the Seder night, we have an obligation that we have to eat matzah. At the night of the Seder, where the obligation to eat matzah on the Seder night, which is a one-night obligation according to the Torah, is in order to remember how we were rushed out. The matzah that we ate with the Karban Pesach, the fact that the Torah tells us we can only eat matzah for all 7 days of Pesach is to remember the aspect of what matzah represents of lechem oni. Matzah is called the bread of poverty. A poor man eats matzah. A poor man eats matzah because he wants his bread to be thick and simple, so it fills him more, so he can eat less. That's one explanation of what it means, matzah called lechem oni. And the slaves in Egypt were fed matzah for that same reason. It should fill them, and they should be able to have more time to work than to eat. That's as an aspect to remind us of our poverty, of our affliction in Egypt. And that is the aspect of matzah that the Jewish people ate with the Karban Pesach before they left. As they were eating the Karban Pesach, which was the carbon to actually realize and think about what was happening outside of them, outside, that Hashem was skipping over their homes by the smiting of the firstborn, together with that, they ate to eat matzah to remember the affliction that they had experienced. That is the purpose of the matzah, but that they ate with the Karban Pesach before they left. But once we left Egypt, on the Seder night, which again, when we had the Beis HaMikdash was with the Karban Pesach, that matzah is about remembering how we were rushed out of Egypt. Because that's what happened when we left Egypt. The night of Pesach is when we are commemorating the actual leaving of Egypt. That is when we eat matzah to remember how we were rushed out. And the other 7 days of Pesach, where again, there's no obligation to eat matzah, but you have to eat matzah if you can eat bread, you can't eat chametz. There too, all that is about remembering lechem oni, remembering the bread of the poor, remembering our affliction and poverty in Egypt. That is what the 7 days are about, because each day of the year and how the Jewish people had suffered all week long. The Jewish people suffered every day when they were slaves in Egypt. So every day of Pesach, we commemorate that. On the night of Pesach, we are commemorating how we were rushed out. And the matzah that was eaten with the Karban Pesach in Egypt, that matzah was also about lechem oni, that it's the bread of poverty to remember the affliction we went through in Egypt. That's the first thing that Matzah Nisim says. Then he brings this discussion about the purpose of understanding what is the point of remembering how we were rushed out. And the way he brings down the question, brings that question in a very interesting way. The way he brings down the question from, actually, quote, the question he brings down from the Maaseh Hashem, that was a commentary, the Maaseh Hashem. And his commentary, his question is like, he puts the question like this. If we're commemorating that we were rushed out of Egypt, must have been a good thing. Wasn't a good thing why we remember it. And that's the implication. Hashem rushed us out. There's something good about that. What's interesting is that the prophet Yeshaya, the prophet Isaiah, when he talks about the ultimate redemption, the redemption that we will have from the exile that we experience, there the prophet Isaiah says, Ki loi b'chi pazen teitzeyu. You shall not leave in a rush. And the commentaries say, you will not leave in a rush, kasher yetzasim mitzrayim. The commentary of Ibn Ezra adds, you will not leave in a rush as you left from Egypt. So here the prophet is telling us that when Mashiach comes, you won't have to rush out like you did from Mitzrayim. You won't have to rush out of the exile as you did in Egypt. Sounds like rushing out of Egypt wasn't a good thing. But it really sounds like when we talk about rushing out of Egypt and we eat matzah because of that, then it was a good thing. So was it good or wasn't it good? So the Matzah Nisim gives the following explanation. And he says like this, that the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to reveal himself to the Jewish people when he took them out of Egypt. Now, let me read how he says this. Hashem wanted to reveal himself to us. Couldn't happen in Egypt, which was a place of tumah, of spiritual impurity. Couldn't happen there. But because he wanted so much to reveal himself to us, therefore he had to rush us out. The purpose of remembering the quickness that we left is to show he took us out quickly because he wanted so much to reveal himself to us because he loved us so much. So what the Matzah Nisim is saying is like this. My understanding is like this. We know that once the Jewish people left Egypt, they were led in the desert with a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. That was a revelation of God to them. That revelation couldn't happen in Egypt. And therefore, because Hashem wanted so much to reveal himself to us, he wanted for us to connect to him so much, he wanted to connect to us so much, he rushed us out. He really wants to connect with us. He rushed us out. That shows us his love. Now, it's interesting to note that in the wording of the Haggadah, it says that the dough did not rise until Hashem revealed him, until Hashem was revealed upon them and redeemed them. So the wording of the Haggadah seems to say that they were rushed out of Egypt because Hashem was revealed to them and redeemed them. It seems like there was, a revelation of Hashem to the Jewish people in Egypt as he was taking them out. Which could mean that there was a certain level of revelation, but a much greater one later. Or perhaps, according to the Matzah Nisim, the wording of the Haggadah is that the dough didn't have enough time to rise before Hashem revealed himself to them and redeemed them, means they didn't have enough time to rise because Hashem wanted to reveal himself to them and redeem them. Not sure if that explanation fits into the word so well. But either way, the point would be is that the kind of revelation that Hashem wanted to, that strong revelation that we see they experienced with the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire after they left, that wasn't going to happen in Egypt. Clearly, the 10 plagues were revelation of God in Egypt, but not that same kind of revelation of the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. That revelation couldn't happen in a place of spiritual impurity of Egypt. Therefore, he rushed them out. He rushed them into the desert, where that kind of impurity wasn't there. And the rush to do so was because he loved us so much. So the point of Hashem rushing us out was because he loved us so much and he wanted to reveal himself to us. Now, when it comes to Mashiach times, of a Begula Asida, but when it comes to the future redemption, Shaz Ruach Hatuma Yaver Min Haaretz, the spirit of impurity, of spiritual impurity, will be removed. There'll be no place of evil in the world. Now everywhere would be fit for the resting of the divine presence. Don't have to rush out anywhere. Whenever a Jew steps, Yisrael will be sanctified like the land of Israel. Now, if we take the wording here, the wording of the Matzah Nisim is pretty strong, where he says, when Mashiach comes, there'll be no place of evil in the world. The divine presence can rest anywhere, and anywhere a Jew treads, or anywhere the Jews tread, will be sanctified like the land of Israel. Sounds like every place will be like Israel, like Eretz Yisrael. So I would venture to say that he doesn't mean that the Eretz Yisrael won't be a special place when the Beis HaMikdash comes. But he does mean to say that every place in the world will be the spirit of evil will be removed from it, from everywhere in the world, and everywhere in the world will be sanctified in a way that the divine presence of Hashem can rest upon the Jewish people wherever they are, as it rests in Eretz Yisrael. And Eretz Yisrael will be even bigger. But as it rests in Eretz Yisrael, let's say now, or the fact that you can have this kind of revelation of Hashem's divine presence only in Eretz Yisrael, when Mashiach comes, a revelation of Hashem's divine presence can happen anywhere. So in contrast to them having to rush out of Egypt so they could experience the divine presence of Hashem, that could only happen if they were out of Egypt. So Hashem rushed them out of Egypt because he loved them so much and wanted so much to reveal himself to them. That's why they have to be rushed out. That won't be necessary when Mashiach comes. Because the world, anywhere in the world, anywhere where a Jew will be a place where the divine presence can rest and be revealed to the Jewish people. So according to this explanation, the reason why we are remembering Hashem, that we were rushed out of Egypt, is in order for us to appreciate Hashem's love for us. Hashem wanted to reveal himself to us. He wanted to rest the divine presence on us. That couldn't happen in Egypt. He wanted it, and he wanted it so badly that he rushed us out so that it could happen as soon as possible. That is how we see Hashem's love for us. When we left Egypt, where we know we left Egypt in a very lowly spiritual state, but he loved us so much that he wanted so badly to connect with us, to reveal himself to us, that he rushed us out so that it could happen as soon as possible. When Mashiach comes, the kind of revelation of Hashem that will happen when Mashiach comes, we don't have to rush out of anywhere, because wherever we are, we'll be able to experience it. Because wherever we'll be, there'll be no more tumah, there'll be no more spiritual contempt, there'll be no more power of evil, of spiritual contempt. And therefore, everywhere, it'll be possible to have the revelation of Hashem's presence. May we see that coming and that be fulfilled quickly in our days. Have a wonderful evening.